Welcome to this video. Thanks for tuning in and sharing in this now moment with myself and with one another. If you haven't seen these videos, welcome. Welcome back if you have. My intention is unity and oneness and the highest levels of love light. I'm going to invite everybody to just take a deep breath in, long exhale. We're still in this very Aurora-esque energy. I'm going to talk a little bit about continuing from the previous video that I did with my sister and dear friend Candace Co. We did a video yesterday and we covered a lot of topics on the equinox. We're still in the vibrations of the equinox today. We're still in these lingering full moon energies. We still have a lot of solar activations coming in, and it is this constant movement that's essentially happening. And there are these highs and lows that are coming in, and I could go into so many different topics right now. I'm going to talk a little bit about perspective. I'm going to read a little bit about what I've written in code and decode it. And the reason I'm reading this particular writing, and I'm going to share, which is an energy update about what's happening to us, essentially, from my guidance team, is when Candace and I did the video the other day, there was this frequency that we kind of dropped into from one perspective, or that we invited to be more felt through the intuition of connecting with it. We all hold certain geometric codes and keys. I activate these codes and keys through the language variation and influctuation that I use in my voice, electricity. And I'm in flow right now, you guys. I'm just kind of rolling with it. I use these different codes and geometric equivalents of the alchemy that I hold within my own codex, within my own form of transcription, that I then transcribe to the listener, to the reader, to that who it is that is connected into the flow that I am feeling into, that I am offering through the airwaves, if you will, through the waves, through the radiation that is radiating from me out through me in a key, if you will, a certain key, a tonality, a keyboard, a frequency, a key, a key. Where? Here. I guess I'm just going to go into some light language too, so I'll roll back and forth into all this. And so we're feeling into a lot of the solar codes that are coming in. And what's happening is they're dropping in to us. And the more that we give ourselves the opportunity to drop in and to pay attention to that key, it allows us to tune up, to tune into our own technology. This means remembering things that we have access to that we've maybe never felt, processed, or understood before. But it's starting to make sense. When I say make sense, it's a play on words. It's starting to increase in our sensibility, our ability of our heightened sense of self, and higher sense of awareness. We become aware of these influctuations and how it is that we are processing, communicating, and leveling up, if you will. So that's kind of the energy update. We're tuning into this aurora. And this aurora, I play with this word a lot because it's aurora borealis. It's connecting into that snake that's eating its tail, which is aurora boreal. It's pronounced different. I'm sorry, I mix up my words sometimes. But I'm also seeing reference to the solar influctuations are heightening this aurora temperature, the temperature, the air, right? The fire. I think I said we were going into fire, but I meant we were going into air. That's interesting. Whew, I think we're going into both. I don't know how to explain that, but I feel that with the sun and the air, it's almost like this mix of air. I don't know if Aries is air, maybe air, Aries, or if it's a fire sign. I'm obviously not an astrology buff, but what I'm feeling is this heightened fire in the air, like this sense of fire and wispy light that's coming in. And what I'm seeing is it's combining with the water. So it's all of these elements and elementals that we are essentially tuning into that are tuning into us in a different way than maybe we've felt it before. To me, it looks like Aurora Borealis, the colors. If you Google what that looks like, it's beautiful. So my friend Jess had tuned into the video that Candace and I did, and Jess couldn't join us because she had other obligations, and sometime soon the three of us are going to be doing some videos together. But she said she was seeing, as we were doing the light language and speaking and just sharing the energy and pulling it through our own awareness, our own voice, our own awareness. She was seeing this aurora light, all of these beautiful aquas and variations of aquas. I have a tendency with aurora, I see aquas, I see these light, misty pinks and peaches and lilac and aqua greens and blues. It's a very beautiful mix of all of these colors. And so that's what I've been feeling. And it sounds like something that is ethereal. It sounds like something. And some of us can hear it and we're not sure exactly what that is, but we're really being invited to feel into it, to close our eyes, to see if any colors show up behind the lids, to see if we feel into any colors. And so that's something else I wanted to share as well. Okay, so as Candace and I were going back and forth in this video, she brought up trick or treat. The way that she was speaking about it, it was reminiscent of we can choose whether these energies that are coming in are treats or a trick. We can choose this or we can choose that. We can move and allow these energies to move through us, and we can choose to trick ourselves into thinking one thing, or we can allow ourselves to be tricked in the moment to use that as a way of learning. So sometimes the trickster is the teacher, and that was something else that was coming up as a message. That is a universal message right now. But recognizing and seeing from a higher perspective the treat in the trick. And so that's kind of one of the things that's been coming through. We talked about how Hayoka and how a lot of the shamans, the storytellers, and I may not be pronouncing that right, Hayoka, taught by stories and acting one way and asking us questions and causing us to be thinking and feeling all at the same time as we interpret these stories. So that's another wave or way of learning and experiencing that's being offered to us right now, if that makes sense. Using Coyote as our teacher, right? Recognizing that at times it can be beautiful and other times it can be a little tricky. Tricky. Okay. So I wanted to go back. So as soon as Candace said trick or treat, the ironic part about that was before I'd gotten onto the video with her, I had opened up my phone to look at the recording I had done the day before because I thought it would be relevant to some of the subject matter that we were getting ready to discuss or to share. And what happened is my phone, all of those recordings that I had done had been moved into another compartment, into another file. I couldn't find them. The only one that was available to me that I found right away was one from Halloween, Trick or Treat. And I had just typed that one up in part, but I never completed it. So I'm in the process of completing that writing. And what I was shown is it's valid for the information now. And so I'm going to share that now with you guys briefly. And I'm being guided to do a little bit more light language and kind of roll. I'm being guided to roll in and out of all of this and use these bandwidths however I feel called to work. And the message behind that message is that many of us are finding difficulty staying with one thing. We're finding maybe we're blaming it on our ADHD or ADD. And I know those are a little different, and apologies for not knowing exactly the definition of the differences of both. But what happens is sometimes we follow this and we get pulled off course and then we're here and we're there. Sometimes that's okay. It's a gift. And other times we can use that to still stay on topic. We can still stay looking ahead, yet we can recognize all these other things that we're dipping in and out of are also relevant for the bigger picture. That makes sense? Okay. So I'm just going to do a little light language, and then I'm going to go back into reading what I wrote. And then I'm going to show this little diagram that I drew on my little whiteboard and go over that briefly. So this language changes the frequency and the vibration. We're invited to hear the sound behind the sound, the tonology, and what is coming through the voice. For this is changing the frequency in which we sit within. It's changing the frequency and the vibration that we listen into, from, and with. Tiweane kiniane, kiniwa ana tini ayat inikinela at ine. Tile una anelea wakanea, tile ele all ele anikile titule kin ele titi. Lulu una kili enelea da ole hen ele ule inikile et ila. I'm mixing a couple different languages here. Tile olea na kulelea titi la ona kilele ono na kilea tule enia. Tila ane e tila hakuleheni it ilehes te kila anak ile. And I invite everyone to do that on their own, however they feel guided, whatever the call is. Change this light a little bit. I'm looking a little orange there. I'm not sure what's going on with this light. But I'm going to hit pause because I'm going to read a little bit. I don't know, seems a little bit better. I'm a little less orangey. All right, so let's just play with this just for a moment. And basically I'm going to read what I wrote, and then I'll go back in and break it down just a little bit. So, and then I'll share screen in just a minute after I read. So I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm going to read basically what I've typed up and go backwards. And this is a code. It's multi-dimensional coded writing. And what it does is it activates certain potentials within our memory so we can integrate certain information. It might trigger us in certain ways to feel into something that we haven't processed yet, or that we might be interested in, or it might be just something that doesn't necessarily resonate at the time, but then later on it can create a ping in our map ping system where later on we go, oh, that reminds me of this. I don't even know why I'm thinking of that. And it's basically a way to get us out of a linear path and more on a multi-dimensional, multi-directional flow. So I'm just going to read it out loud briefly, and then I'll come back in, and it's not going to be as long as some of my other ones. Ignore all my spelling bloopers on here, because I have not even like updated it yet, meaning spell checked it or anything. Okay, there is an incoming fluctuation, solar bandwidths, if you will. As these solar frequencies wind up the band from one perspective, it allows that which has been contraindicated into the system to be contraindicated. Remember, you are warming up to this frequency. You are warming up to this form of communication. As you practice using it, you will learn to use it with more eloquence. For now, you are divided into many spectrums, or so it feels. You, the star of seeds, you are divided into many different spectrums. And within each of these spectrum banks gives us the opportunity to bank on you. For each person holds a different perspective, point of view. It allows us each to combine our own frequency sets in an animalistic, play on words, anomalistic way. Anomaly patterns, minimalistic anomalies. In pattern of anomalies that are difficult to counter, impose, impasse, that are difficult to counter, that are difficult to pose regulations upon. This is a gift, for as you quill this pen to paper, as you will, As you allow yourself to dip into these inks of registration, as you allow yourself to dip into these ink bands, as you allow these ink bands to register, you then continue to hold a certain frequency, time-imposed memory bank. You guys, I'm going to get to this later. We understand these words are strange and difficult to convey, but we also invite you to remind yourself to stay relaxed. These different frequency patterns are linked up to a higher network of alchemy. They are linked up to a higher network of an academy that ranges from certain metronics and metronics that create certain global scale reversal global pattern networks. Let us descramble this a bit for you so you can fall into it a bit easier. Ink banks, incandescence. You allow yourself to link up with these codes that allow you to assist in breaking bread, that allow you breaking in the bread patterns, if you will, bread patterns in bread patterns. It is a lot, for it unlocks a certain codex where certain information that spills forward in the background as well in the brain. It allows these bandwidths to create a certain ability to learn new terrain, if you will, subterrain, subtrain, these different decisive landscapes that everybody is separated into from one perspective, is essentially chimed together. These metatronic sites, yes, the word can be played with, are allowing certain patterns to be reborn again. The original codes that were once transposed or miscalculated are actually changing the way that reality sits. These codes that were once miscalculated are now being revisited so they can be addressed. This is a play on words. So they can be accessed for the higher well-being of humanity. For as we allow these frequency sets to move into a state of harmonic merge dance, there are no two codes alike. For as you are a unique expression of the divine consciousness structure, so are your brothers and sisters. It's important to remember. As each of you holds frequency patterns and networks that are certainly similar in striation, if you will, the variation in which all of you are in creation holds together a certain substantial framework of substance, and that which has been abused and created to confuse is now moving into Confucianism. Let us play with this a bit because the order is not correct. There have been certain dream time, incandescent, calibration, vibrational node points in which the star children have become locked into from one perspective. This ability to see a broader point of view on what this means is subjective, is the subject of our narrative, is what we wish to create together with and unfold. For the children that have been encapsulated within this particular influxometry, if you will, I was saying influxometry, influenzometry, are negotiating contextual acquisitions. And this is all a play on words, you guys. Let us play with that a little bit more. The negotiations have been set up to create a disbanding of policymakers. The policymaker that once held a high standard were actively discorded, if you will. They were broken away from. They broke away from. I was saying how difficult this was saying this because I was really having a hard time like working through this. And my guides were like, it's difficult to speak in the soup sometimes. And it's difficult to speak in the suit sometimes. for my crossbeam technology, your crossbeam technology, is interfering with the interfacing, with interreferencing with other network decodement systems. There's much to be held within these codes, and the ability to communicate with them is basically tying together off-topic and on-topic communication, quite the essence of fabrication. We are now creating channels in which it is easier to access this type of communication. Yet it has been hijacked before. So we now wish to create a score and a pattern in which this hijacking, if you will, it is truly jacked into a higher consistency of inner geometry, interferometry, and creative substance. It is no longer held down. And as we allow ourselves to break through this mold, if you will, as we allow ourselves to break out of the moldy contributing sector, play on words, that has created such time imbalances, we then have to learn a way to balance out our own way. And it's kind of, I'm hearing out of our own way of communication to balance out the harmonics and use the influctuations to gather our resources. For these influctuations or breaks in the mold, if you will, these categories that are breaking the mold create opportunity, give us an opportunistic advantage, if you will. We are then able to access a greater congruency. I think I wrote congruency. We then split into many different pieces so that the pieces that are gathered needs to then be recalculated, recalibrated, and then cannot be manipulated. For these old time band manipulations have lost their winning streak. They do not speak in the same way that they once did. And therefore, it is not as cohesive, right? We are focusing on this quite a bit. This creates a way to graph into these older subsets, if you will, and see that much is at your fingertips. The graphing, the graphics, the graphic designs of the higher design networks are now subsequently able to graph into your subsequent network so you can harness the interactivity, freedom, and choice. You must trust your inner landscape. You must trust the choices you are making. I'm going to end on that note, and I'll do a second video on this because it's going to be long enough as it is. And I just want to dip into briefly, and I'm just going to share screen. And overall, there's a lot in this coded writing. And essentially, in a nutshell, what I was shown is these bandwidths were warming up to this frequency. So have you guys noticed? I mean, it's just a lot. Many people are tired all the time. I'm super energized today, yet really tired at the same time. I actually need to stop and drink some water right now. But it's like we're adjusting to these incoming bandwidths and frequencies. So we're going to find ourselves going high and going low until we find that way to ride the wave the best way that we can and the best way that we know how in any given moment is what I'm hearing. Moment to moment, readdressing where our home base is. For some days, our baseline frequency is higher and it's easier for us to feel into these things. And other days, our baseline frequency is lower and we might need more sleep. You know, we might need more time, literally time to make these adjustments. So what I was shown is, if we look at this, I drew these three little stick figures. And if you look at the angle that I have there, one is looking in one angle, another is looking in another angle, and another is looking at a different angle. And they're all seeing things. This is the same person, essentially, each at a different time. They're not the same person down here that they were 5 minutes ago. And they're looking at things, it's still all a 90-degree angle, but because they turned their head differently, it now is adjusting to all, by the way, at the time they get to be here, it's a completely different perspective. And you guys, this is happening for us fast, moment to moment to moment, right? And what I'd written is, these are perspective, these are timestamps. And it was funny because this has been a subject that I've been talking with Candace and Jess about a lot, and some of my dear friends, my dear friend Kat. We talk about these time signature frequency sets. Well, that's what I call them. We can call them time stamps, where at a moment it's stamped into, it's embedded. So when I write this, for example, when I write it and I bring it from my mind or from my telepathic communication with my higher self, or my interaction with my guidance team, whatever we want to label it as, and I put it on paper, I am then time stamping it in that moment that I brought it from the aether, the ethers, whatever we want to call it, the ethereal, otherworldly realm, into this material world, right? I then time stamp it in that moment, in that reality. We are all being invited to do that, because the more we are out here and the less that we're actually bringing it into this reality, the more it continues to exist out there. But we in physical form are really being guided to embody it, and we cannot embody it if we're not in our bodies from one perspective, and that goes into many different directions. And I just want to share screen just for a minute. I won't go through that whole thing that I just wrote. I just want to kind of touch over the beginning, and then I'll do a part 2 of the video. So basically, there is an incoming fluctuation, solar bandwidth. So I was being pre-warned about these incoming fluctuations, but this was also happening back in October as well. As these solar frequencies wind up the band, and I was thinking about a wind-up toy, these are giving us a push, you guys, and they're pushing us out of our comfort zone into these, what it is that we're asking for. We're asking questions like, show me. I am, at least, I don't know about you guys, I'm pretty sure many of us are, show me what I need to work on. Show me how to improve. Show me what I can do to be of service, right? So it allows that which has been contraindicated into the system. So in medicine, a contraindication is a condition that serves as a reason not to take a certain medical treatment due to the harm it would cause the patient. So basically, it's a reason not to do something because of the side effects. Like if you're injured, there's certain exercises that are contraindicated against doing because it makes it worse. So basically, absolute contraindications are contraindications for which there are no reasonable circumstances for undertaking a course of action. For example, children and teenagers with viral infections should not be given aspirin because it could give them the symptom, which I think is ironic because it's called the ray system, and I'm talking about all the different spectrums, which are essentially rays. But basically, if you're allergic to certain foods, you shouldn't eat foods that have that allergy. But it also talks about, hold on, I want to go into this just for a moment. So what I wrote was, it allows that which has been contraindicated into the system to be contraindicated. So this is a play on words, because essentially we're canceling out all of these things. All of these things have been put into our system. They were like, don't do this because that'll happen. It was almost like it was that inversion, we could call it, if that makes sense. And I'm just going to pause this just for a moment. So I always like this because if I go into, so that which has been contraindicated into the system to be contraindicated, canceled out. So if you look at contra, it's the opposition, that which has been against, that which has been in opposition, you know, to point out or to show. Well, now we're pointing out and showing that which we've been in opposition to. It's now being brought back in saying, hey, this is the contraindication to the contraindication, which is ironic, I think, because everything is so backwards and everything has been so backwards for so long. My guidance team was saying, remember, you are warming up to this frequency. So this constant influx of solar frequencies and energies, we're warming up to this, you guys, literally. The earth is warming up. Our bodies are warming up. There's much more aurora around us. And what this is doing is this is stirring it up. It's churning it up. Everything. I am warming up to this form of communication, but this form of communication isn't just what I'm writing. It's about this connection to source. It's about communicating with our team. It's about communicating with our higher self. And as we do this, as we warm up to the bandwidths and the information that we have access to, we're learning to use it with more eloquence. For now, you are divided. So you are now divided into many different spectrums, or so it feels. So it feels that we're divided. How many of us have listened to, oh, I'm a Blu-ray. Oh, I'm a starseed from Andromeda. Oh, I'm from the Pleiades. Ultimately, I've always said, for those that have listened for a while, I'm many different things. I'm a hybrid. As a human, we are all hybrids. Our DNA holds many different complexities within it, not just one thing, yet we are not really separate. We all come from the original sound, from another perspective. Now, if I just dip into this briefly, well, what does that look like? Well, the ironic part about this is it says, for now you are divided into many different spectrums. Hold that thought. I just have to hit pause just for a moment. Okay, sorry, I had to pause that for a second. My husband was home and I had to say hello. All right, so spectrums. We are divided into many different spectrums, or so it feels. Well, the ironic part about a spectrum, when you look it up, is it's a rainbow. So technically, we're all divided from one perspective into these different spectrums, but it's also sound spectrum. So I'll come to that in just a moment. And I thought it was interesting to read this. Is a condition that is not limited to a specific set of values, but can vary across a continuum. So it's like different variations, right? If I look at that. And it was used to show colors in visible light after passing through a prism. And I just feel like that's all of this is so synchronistic, right? If you go down to the etymology, it's apparition, right? An image. We're all divided into these different images, okay? So that's what I kind of wanted to go to with that. And it says that's how it feels, that we're all divided into this, but really a spectrum isn't separate, right? Just because something's a rainbow doesn't mean it's separate from the air, doesn't mean it's separate from the water, but also it has to do with how the light is reflected or seen through a prism, okay? And basically then my guides go on to say, you, the star seeds, you are divided into many different spectrums. So we're not really, but we are, because each of us holds a different bank. Now, if I play with this a little bit, so if I just play with this, it's a financial institution, okay? But there's more to that, of course. And it shows a natural earthen incline bordering a body of water, otherwise known as a sandbank. This is so funny. Oh my gosh, I could really play with this for a minute. I just went poof. So I see this as different. For me, I really kind of was drawn more to the word bank. So if I go back into, you were divided into many different spectrums and these banks. So it's a holding place for value. Okay, it holds value. And it gives us the opportunity to bank on you. Who are us? Our guides, our higher self, our future versions of us. It gives all of that an opportunity to put value back into us and to bank on us, which means to, when we bank on something, we are rooting for it, right? We are putting our value in it. So not only are we holding this value, but others are also see us as valued, okay? And we're holding that. For each person holds a different perspective. Now, I wanted to go back to the different angles that I had drawn earlier. Each person has a different perspective, and I combine that with perspective and spectrum. So my view that I'm looking through holds a certain value, whereas somebody else is going to be a completely different angle. And what this does is it makes each individual unique drop of water in the ocean each hold a different frequency and vibration or perspective that then vibrates together and creates a more unified yet also varied experience. Okay, it allows us each to combine our own frequency sets. I think I was going to go back to spectrum also as sound. I didn't really say that, but spectrum also has to do with acoustics and sound. Okay, it allows us to combine our own frequency sets. So when I say frequency set, it is our ability to move. It's also our vibration that we're set within. It's rhythm. We each have a certain harmony, right? In an anomalistic way, anomaly patterns, a minimalistic anomaly. So I'm going to come into that in just a moment and go a little deeper. In patterns of anomalies that are difficult to counter, impose. So I'm going to play with this just for a moment. So it allows us each to combine these frequency sets in anomaly patterns. The reason I'm sharing this is I'm going to go a little us versus them in this particular recording. So we're combining our frequencies and we are the anomaly. We are the glitch in the matrix is essentially what they're telling us. And it creates anomaly patterns, and they are difficult to counter. They're difficult to impose, and they're difficult impose. So they're difficult for them to be held. They're difficult. So if they do this, we'll do that. But if I say for a moment that the star seeds are creating anomalies, what that looks like is we aren't reacting in the same way to the system or to the programs because we hold a multi-dimensional perspective and point of view that allows us to operate differently than those who do not. And so we're creating a ripple in the field. And this then, we combine this together as a starseed community of humanity, that it makes it difficult for those that would seek to keep us in this old system to impose. So they're difficult to counter, impose, that are difficult to pose regulations upon. Okay. And I'm just going to pause for a moment. That's pretty self-explanatory. So we are creating these anomalies. What are the anomalies? Again, it's a deviation from a rule or form, what is regarded as a normal. So we're a deviance. It's an exception. It's an irregularity. It's a phenomenon. But I like that because it always makes me think of what's that movie? Shoot, I can't think of it right now, but it doesn't matter. So it used to be in the old world, or the old way that things were, this wasn't happening. Things would happen, there were cycles, and they could be easily imposed. So these regulations could be set based on countering what it was that we would react to. It's different now. It's difficult to impose these. It's difficult for them to pose. Okay, well, let's do this. And I also see pose, which is fake. So it's difficult for whoever these rule makers are to pose regulations on. It makes them difficult to even pose the theory or pose the question, because we see them as a pose. We see them as fake. It's a charade, right? We see through it. And when I was playing with this, I was writing that it's difficult to impose, and I was also writing in passé. So it makes it difficult when in passé is where you can't make changes. So it's like we are making these changes. Anyways, this is a gift for as you quill this pen to paper. Sorry, I'm not sure if I'm, okay, I am. This is a gift for you as you quill this pen to paper as you will. So I'm willing this into my reality, and I'm using my will, right? As you allow yourself to dip into these inks of registration, it's a signature, it's a letter, it's a frequency that essentially I am making real now as I write it in code from my own inner abode. As you allow yourself to dip into these ink bands. So I'm registering this into the Akash. I'm registering this into my reality. I'm creating a registration in which it is bonded in time, right? As you allow these ink bands to register, and that's a play with the time bands and the registration, you're putting something into the Akash or whatever we want to call it. You then continue to hold a certain frequency, time-imposed memory bank. So if I go back to this, it's a timestamp. It's now in the memory bank. It's now something I can use and bank on. This is a time imposed. So it can be now put into time. And earlier I was saying, well, it's difficult to counter or impose, right? Whew. Sorry guys, the energies are so strong. And essentially it's imposed. So I'm putting it into this place, okay? Which is ironic because things are trying to be imposed upon us, and I'm imposing this back in saying, no, this is my will, right? And this then allows me to hold that frequency and not be tied into other frequencies maybe that might be more distracting. And it's a bank. So when we dip into the Akash, when we put something in it, everything's already there from one perspective. It's already been written. It's already been done because everything is now. But what we're doing is essentially we're bringing it into the memory bank. And earlier I had said that beings are banking on us and we are banking on ourselves. And so it puts it into this space that it can be utilized. Okay. And again, I'm being invited to go back and remind everybody trick or treat. It can be a trick or it can be a treat, but it's how we perceive it. So from my perspective, I don't see it as bad or good or this or that. I am just looking at it as a creative tool to then bring forward pieces of information that can then be utilized for whatever they can be utilized for. And so from us, it's our perspective, whether we want to be trick or treat. You know what I mean? Let's stay in that higher frequency. Then it holds that frequency. So I'm not in a place of negativity. I'm in a place of positivity. We understand these words are strange and difficult to convey at times, but we also remind you to stay relaxed. These frequency patterns are linked up to a higher network of alchemy. So it's a time signature. It's like, boom, it's a rhythm. That ranges from certain metatronics. All right, now I'm going to dip into this. And metronics that create certain global scale reversal pattern global networks. So here's where I can go with trick or treat. For those of us that know a little bit about some of the reversal systems on a global scale, we understand that there have been things that have been implemented within our reality structure that created certain things to be reversed, or what's the other word, inverted, all of that. Also, keeping in mind, I wrote this back of October of 2021. Things have changed now, and we actually hold a higher spectrum where we really are all together, and we're not as divided as we once were, okay, when I wrote this. but also recognizing that this comes into metronics. So it has to do, if I play with this a little bit, I put metronics, like me. I'm creating this on a global scale. We, not me as in Carrie, but each of us holds this certain thing that creates and connects with these higher alchemies and academies, a higher school, right? A higher learning and a higher share. So I'm going to just share the. Okay, so it says that they're linked up to a higher network, certain metronics and metronics that create certain global scale reversal pattern global networks. So this is a play on words, okay? There is, so boy, I could go into so many different things. Part of it is metronomic, okay? Metronomic is mechanically or unvaryingly regular in rhythm. So it does create a rhythm. It's that tempo, right? It's that beat. And essentially it's unwavering, okay, from one perspective. From another perspective, the combination of this is that it's a scale, a harmony, a meta, a met. So, and then we could go into, I mean, we could use the slang for what metronics is, but that's not what this is referring to. Some of these words like that have been utilized to conform into a particular category is an example of what we're not doing with this particular type of writing. So it's, I'm going to play with, okay. So if I go into this, met is defined as two or more people or things that have come together or connected, right? So we're creating this metatronic, okay? Now if I go into this a little, oops, did I think I hit record again. Huh. I did. So also it's a reference to mechatronics, which is engineering and robotics. It's this combination of all of these tools having to do with electrical energy, as well as a coming together of this electrical energy. So they create a global scale reversal pattern of global networks. So it created some reversals, and we are essentially creating the reversals to the reversals. Again, we're the glitch in the matrix, and this is how we're doing it. Let us descramble this a bit for you so you can fall back into it a bit easier. And that was a play on words. Fall back has to do with time, right? So let us descramble this a bit for you so you can fall into it a bit easier, but it was back into it. But anyways, it had to do with time. Inks, banks, and incandescence. You allow yourself to link up with these codes that allow you to assist in breaking bread, in breaking space, in bread, breaking in the bread patterns, if you will, bread patterns. All right, that's kind of a play with, I think you guys can get where that's going. And if I go into the space, it says incandescence. So it's these banks, it's incandescence. Well, incandescence is the emission of electromagnetic radiation from a hot body as a result of its high temperature. Our temperature is going up, all right? Not only within our bodies, doesn't mean that we're going to start running hot all the time. I don't know, maybe literally we will, but this has to do with energetically, right? And essentially it's allowing us to link up with these codes that allow us to assist in breaking bread. Now as I see breaking bread, I see breaking bad. I see crystal blue persuasion. I'm seeing the crystal, the lattice work. I'm hearing the blue, that aqua energy of this higher sun code light. So I play with even that and my brain goes ring. And essentially this is, they're talking about we're creating this ink, these ink bands are incandescence. So the essence of a higher frequency and a higher temperature. And we're emitting this. I mean, this is really cool. This is what it looks like to me. Or, you know, it's pretty cool, pretty exciting from one perspective. Whew. And I could probably keep going into all of these layers, but let's keep going. And I'll finish this until do part 2. So to assist us in breaking bread. So it's helping us when we break bread with someone else, right? What is that a sign of? We can sit at their table, we can communicate, we can have a conversation, we're sharing with one another. And that's what it's all about. This is helping us to break bread with, from the way that I write, with my higher guidance team, with my higher self. Although this isn't about my writing, this is also about what we're doing energetically, right, with each other. Okay, we're breaking bread with one another. We're breaking space. And this is literal as well. It has something to do with the space that we're in. And we're breaking in the bread patterns. So the bread patterns that are inside of us that have been bred into us from one perspective. And I wrote inbreeding, right? So essentially, if we look at our DNA, this is inside of us. The codes that we are looking for to higher tools are inside of us, held within the space of our body, and we are essentially, it's held within the space of the place that we exist within, and it's helping us to create with this higher vision, higher self, the oversoul, our guides, our angelics, all right? Then we break in the inbred patterns. So whatever's been bred in, we break it in so we can get in touch with it. It is a lot, for it unlocks a certain codex or certain information that spills forward in the background as well in the brain. So it's a lot was also a play on words, like it's a place, it's a lot, right? What's held within a lot, right? That's a place. It holds something. Spills. That's it. Also, it spells forward, it spills forward, it's overflowing out, it's liquid. It's not held within, it's moving outside in the background as well, in the brain. So this has to do with the glandular activations within the body. It spills out of the pituitary, it spills out of the pineal, and it floods from one perspective. This liquid light moves throughout our entire body. That spills forward in the background as well. It allows these bandwidths to create a certain ability to learn new terrain, if you will. Subterrain, subterrain, these different decisive landscapes that everybody is separated into from one perspective. So basically, we're creating the ability to learn this new terrain. It's like, whoa, we have these abilities, but it's new for us. It's unexplored, because it's not something we're used to utilizing. It's opening up that back brain, okay? The front, it's connecting it all. And decisive, I think it was divisive is what I meant to write. Divisive landscapes that everybody is separated into from one perspective. So we're all in different realities. We're all in a different place on the earth. We all live in a house. And so we all feel separate from each other, but that was a divisive from one perspective. Divisive, why isn't that automatically auto spell? I don't know if I'm spelling that right. So it's essentially timed and chimed together. So essentially the sound, it's all timing. It's timed that we would be going through this when we're going through it. These Metatronic sites play on words. So this can be, we could go with this, we could go with that. We could say that there's certain sites on the earth that have been electrically and mechanically stimulated to create certain reversals in the system, right? Within our reality, to create certain things that draw our awareness into those things. And so we could go down there if we want into the subterranean. We could go underneath the earth to see these particular pieces of equipment, okay? And they were created for certain reasons. So subterranean, think of the tunnels, the underground planes of existence, okay? And they were essentially timed at a certain time, and they chimed together. So they all worked together to create these reversals. And so these systems are allowing certain patterns to be reborn again. So from one perspective, we're seeing, what patterns are we seeing coming up again right now, you guys? What are we seeing going on outside of us? We're seeing separation. We're seeing war potentials. We're seeing certain things going on in our financial system. It's a cycle. It's a timing. They're chimed together. And essentially, these are being reborn again. But at the same time, because our chime, our sounds are lighting up, and we're becoming more anomalies, not animalistic, we're becoming anomalistic, then we are allowing certain patterns to be reborn again from within us. That's in our DNA. So it's that crested frequency, because part of this was talking about breaking bread. That was a reference to the Bible, and that was a reference to that energy of being one with your neighbor, that crested frequency, reborn. And think about what we've got coming up. It's Easter, okay? I'm seeing this whole timing as far as writing this. So it's allowing certain patterns to be reborn again. What does Easter represent? Rebirth, right? Coming back. Risen. Rising in the bread, the leavening, right? We're breaking the pattern so that some of these old things don't come up again, even though they are being brought up, but we are countering them. The original codes that were once transposed or miscalculated are actually changing the way that reality sits. This is kind of important. So basically, these sites, these places where there were these electrical things, we could look at it some positive and we could look at it as some negative, right? We are those anyways. So they're the original codes that were once transposed. So transposed, if we look it up, seriously, you guys, are you guys seeing this? This is hilarious. In linear algebra, the transpose of a matrix is an operator which flips a matrix over its diagonal. That is, it switches the row and column indices. Oh my gosh, I could play with that word so much. Of the matrix by producing another matrix. Oh, you guys. So I could look at this in so many different ways. Flip it and reverse it. I've been writing about that for years. So if I look back at this, the original codes were once transposed. So transpose, if you just look at the other basic meaning of this, it is two or more things change places with each other. So the codes were taken and switched, right? And that means they were miscalculated. And because of those miscalculations, according to what I'm being shown, is it's changing the way reality sits. Now, when I say sits, I think that's a play on words, but where we are located, how we are hanging out in space. Because from one perspective, our belief in how that reality looks created codes, because we are creators. So we actually have added to the ability for our reality to sit a certain way, because we've all had a combined effort of intent and focus. So therefore, we've intentionally focused our energy and our creative aspects on a particular reality. Therefore, the original codes were flipped and miscalculated, and that changed our reality, okay? Those codes that were once miscalculated are now being revisited. Again, this is coming back to it again, so that they can be addressed. So some of these things, and I keep saying that I'm seeing like mathematics changing. I'm seeing that there's going to be certain things that all of a sudden they're going to be like, hey, the golden means, I don't know if it's going to be the golden means, but I'm using it as an example. Hey, by the way, the Fibonacci sequence isn't accurate. Or the golden spiral was missing this. I think those are and I'm, again, math, not my strong point, but something in this whole schematic was changed. So therefore, our reality could only be developed to a certain level from a logical perspective. But if you change it back, it's revisited so that it can be addressed. When you give an address to something, it gives us a place to park. It's a home. So you give it a number, and that number is then put on a map. That then tells you where the positioning of the home base is because of the vibration of the numbers. The sequence and the order of the location gives you the information about the length of time it takes to get there, and it gives you information about how to get there, and it gives you information about the terrain of where it is located, subterranean, terrain. You see where I'm going with this? Subatomic. And it also is then addressed. Like, I'm going to talk about it now. So it's being revisited, it's being discussed, okay, so that they can be accessed. So the codes, this is all being readdressed so that these codes can be accessed, okay, for the higher well-being of humanity. So when I say a well, again, Candace and I just randomly talked about this yesterday, but it's that chalice for the well-being of humanity, okay? For as we allow these frequency sets, right, Metatronic, but it's mechatronic, it's, what is that word? You know what I mean. Obviously, math and music, right? We allow these frequency sets to move into a state of harmonic merging. The bandwidths are merging. Merge, dance. There are no two codes alike. So let me go back to share screen. There are no two codes alike. For you, for as you are a unique expression of the divine consciousness structure, so are your brothers and sisters. So it's recognizing that we each hold these patterns that create our reality structure, which is a divine consciousness structure, okay? And I see this as a lattice work, a crystal lattice work. As each of you holds frequency patterns and networks that are certainly similar in striation, if you will. And you guys know what striation looks like, right? Lines, how thick it is. I think of the body and the connective tissue. The variation in which all of you are in creation. So this is all even a play on words, right? We're all varied. We are all in creation. So we're all part of this creation, but we're also in creation. So we're in the motion of creating as a creator, because we are creating as we are in the structure of creation having been created. It holds together a certain substantial framework of substance. And that which has been abused, substance abuse, and created to confuse, is now moving into Confucianism, Confucius. So I'm going to play with that just for a moment. Okay, I didn't know that he created, I mean, that's loosely spoken, but the golden rule. I was just talking about the golden means, and now I'm looking at Confucius. I had to look him up. Sorry, my fellow math people. I say fellow, I am not a math person, obviously. But, and I spelled Confucius totally wrong because I was obviously confused. But if we play with this, right, is now moving into Confucianism. So basically, something about what our reality is has been abused. It was mistreated. We were told one thing when it was actually something else. And basically that which was created to confuse us is now moving into Confucianism. So basically we're moving back to the golden rule, but I think this has something to do with the golden rule. And what does that really look like? And what does that really mean? And how is this applicable to everything, right? Let us play with this a bit because the order is not correct. So I think this, just to share from my own perspective, either the way that I worded it, but I think it has to do with the order of things. It has to do with the mathematical order. It's not correct. There is some kind of, and again, I don't know what that is, but I keep writing about it and I have to trust that the information I'm getting is accurate, because most of the time there's a hidden layer or hidden meaning that makes sense to me down the road. There have been certain dream time incandescent calibration vibrational node points in which the star children have become locked into. Now I played with this because that was a lot and that was a big sentence, but dream time incandescent. If I go back to the incandescent, I play with this because I think this is a play on words, partly. Incan, like the Incan nation, and the descendants of the Incas. So there's something going on with that particular era and that particular time stamp. So there have been certain dreamtime Incan descent. So it's incandescent, but Incan descent, but that's one layer. Another layer is literally incandescent. Calibration, which we calibrate something, we balance it, we listen to it, we feel it, it's a caliber. Vibrational node points. So this has to do with dream time is either in the astral, where we all travel to at night in dream time, or it could be the reference also to dream time, which is we're all dreaming from one perspective. We're dreaming our reality. So there's been certain dream time incandescent calibration vibrational node points. A node point is a place that pulls together other points. It's a junction point, but it also holds information in each of those node points, okay? And if we look back at our incandescent, just for fun here, oops. Well, I don't know what I did with it, but in which the star children have become locked into. So from one perspective, so that's a play on words too. A lot of people have gotten drawn into just one perspective, even though from one perspective, all perspectives are part of our experience. There's something that happened that had to do with these node points and vibrational calibration, where people have become locked and rigid into their perspective. And this ability to see a broader point of view on what this means is subjective. So it depends on our experience. It depends on when you watch this video or read what I've written, you are going to see something different than how I see it, because it's based on our own individual experience on how we interpret our environment. Also, how we create our reality. It is also the subject of our narrative. So this entire piece, but also what I've written over everything I've written, the subject is see a broader point of view. Change your perspective. It's all subjective. Be objective. Allow yourself to move and change the objects in which we stare at. For example, I'm hearing that movie Men Who Stare at Goats, thinking of remote viewing. It is the subject of our narrative is what we wish to create together with and unfold. So our guidance team, my guidance team, wants to create this all together and unfold. So the different folds are the different planes of existence. And again, this is a reference to the rose. If you look at a rose and you unfold it, or a lotus flower, right? We're unfolding from that toroidal field and we're spinning again and again and again. For the children that have been encapsulated with this particular influxometry, if you will. So this was a play on words. It was influxometry, and basically are negotiating contextual acquisitions. Now, I'm going to kind of end on this note because I could go into so many different things and I'm running out of time. But essentially, there have been beings who were held within a particular, from one perspective, influxometry, like the flu, like sickness. Okay, it's not sickness. What I'm hearing is dis-ease, not being at ease, not being relaxed, being stuck in this bubble. Okay, but also I'm guided to write the word influxometry. So they're in this state of flux, trapped within this particular encapsulation because of a lot of the things that have been going on. And it's created this vibration, right? And what they're showing me is they're negotiating contextual acquisitions. By the way, this is literal, but it's also not literal. So we are all changing the context and we're acquiring more. We're negotiating, and that's a play on words too, right? Again, I'm hearing negotiating and men who stare at goats. It's a movie, by the way, if you guys watch it. It's old. I can't remember if it was good or not, but I like the subject matter. So negotiating, of course, is when you become we're mediating. We're going between two different contexts. We're acquiring more information, and there's an acquisition going on where we're all moving up into something different. Let us play with that a bit more. The negotiations have been set up to create a disbanding of policymakers. The policymaker that once held a high standard were actively discorded, if you will. Now, this is multidimensional. So from one dimension, let's call it 3D, there is a negotiation that's been set up, meaning it's false. These negotiations aren't real, okay? What they're doing is they're disbanding policymakers who may not have the best. So there's a higher thing going on, and they're disbanding them because the ones that once held the higher standard were actively removed, discorded. They were cut off, okay? The discord. There was discord created around them. They were broken away from. So they're there, but we broke away from them. But on the flip side, a lot of this was created to disband these higher standard policymakers. So the negotiations were set up. Okay, but on the flip side, okay, and I'll just go into this briefly. I was getting a little bit like, oh, wah when I wrote this. And I'm basically beaming into all kinds of information when I write this. And my guides were like, look, you've got a lot of decoding in here. Where do you want to take this? You could go with this, you could go with that. I don't like to focus on 3D stuff because it isn't fun for me. And I like to stay in that space where I'm bridging between the higher and the lower echelons and playing with all dimensions. So there's a lot in these codes, and the ability to communicate with them. I can do off-topic communication, and that's a play on words, which is fabrication, right? So I can feel into different things that are being created and fabricated. I'm feeling into different stories, okay? And I can see in some cases that's a real story, loosely using the word real, and this is a fabrication. Okay. That whole thing's a play on words. They just call it cross-beam technology. I'm beaming into different places, all right? But essentially from that perspective, but from another perspective, the negotiations have been set up. So we are negotiating from a higher perspective, more context, more information. We are acquiring more information. We're taking it. It's an acquisition. Okay, so that's a play on words as well. And by the way, this is a play on words as well because it's literally an acquisition. So we are going into this crystalline water plasma frequency, and the acquisition that's happening has to do with this aqua solar frequency that is happening, that's been written texted into our codex. So there's so many different variations that we can go with this. We are now creating channels in which it is easier to access this type of communication. Yet it has been hijacked before. So we now wish to create a score and a pattern in which this hijacking, if you will, is, yeah, no, that's not it. Basically, so that it won't occur again, so that we're truly a pattern in which it is truly jacked into a higher consistency of energeometry, pherometry, and creative substance. So you guys, I see this as literally substance. We're creating a substance that can be seen, felt, and worked through in our reality. So basically, there have been forms of communication, we could say channelers, people that have channeled information because they were in a place of fear. So this is pherometry. That was the geometry that they were lining up with. And they didn't necessarily find themselves in their heart. So there was information that came in that maybe wasn't in the highest levels of love and light, right? But what's happening is, as a collective, as we raise our frequency and vibration, that can't be jacked into because we're creating an anomaly. So the patterns that were easily jacked into before and the information that was hijacked, or the inverted system will say, it's not happening the same way. So our higher guidance team, our angels, our guides, they're creating a score. Okay, and this has to do with our banking system, by the way, you guys. So if you look at this, we wish to create a score and a pattern in which it is truly jacked into a higher consistency of energeometry. So part of this is about us doing the work and being consistent so we can feel into that pattern, okay? And they're creating a score. And if I go to score, it means a lot of different things, but essentially I like the musical, right? So we're looking at a musical score, and they talk about sheet music, all right? That's not what I really wanted, but that's kind of we're writing here. It's a musical score. It has to do with the value, but in the original word was incision. So it was cuts on a stick so that a tally could be kept. And I guess this had something to do with 20. So 20 might have a play. This has a play on words, but essentially it's a set of staves braced and barred together. So I don't know, I could really play with this, and yeah, so we'll come back to that at a different time. I'm going to end on this note because I'm running out of time, and look at how much longer I have to do. So we're just going to kind of end on this note, and I'll continue this at a different point. I'll just say that it's no longer held down as we allow ourselves to break through the mold, if you will, as we allow ourselves to break out of the moldy contributing sector that has created such time imbalances. So there's been a lot of imbalances with how time works, and many of us know what that means. If you guys don't know, we feel that time is different. It's because it is. So we break through this moldy contributing sector. So it's a space. And when I say moldy, it was, again, we were held down and molded in this old shape, which a shape holds a vibration. Okay, a shape holds a signature frequency. The mold is what we were held within, encapsulated. We're breaking through that, and we're moving out of one sector into a different sector. But that moldy sector is actually literal. It's like moldy. It's got yuck. It's moldy. It's coagulated, and it's when you have mold, it's essentially breaking down, right? And it created some time imbalances. And I think the time imbalances, I'll just say, had to do partly with some of that technology, those Metatron, Metanome, whatever, energies. And by the way, I say that with love because there's good things about those words as well. And we're really being invited to not dive down that rabbit hole and get sucked into this idea of a reality and feel, I'm hearing catapulted into the catapults. Does that make sense? So these, are they catapults? No, those catacombs. Catapulted into the catacombs. You know, it's like these deep layers. We don't need to be down there. We're here. So from my perspective, many of us, what we came here to do is to bridge these realities and to hold together a cohesive unification of frequency with our own individual perspectives so that we can each see the relevancy of each other, so that we can, and that's plan words, we can releve, okay? So we can, what I'm hearing is relive, find a new way to live, but it's not relive the old. It's, there's so much that's coming through right now. I'm just going to kind of end on that note because I could keep going. So anyways, I hope that this was interesting for someone, and maybe you found it a little fun, and maybe it was confusing, and maybe it just is like, okay, ultimately this is what I find joy in. So I'm sharing it with you guys, and I'm appreciative of you guys following it all the way to this point. I'll do a part 2 at some point. And yeah, this is all good news, right? In love and light, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Namaste.